What would you do if the person tearing up your boarding pass had no idea you were the one running the entire airline? What happens when arrogance collides with hidden power 30,000 feet above the ground? This is the story of Dr. Maya Ellington, a woman who carried not just a ticket to seat 2A, but the quiet strength of someone who had faced a lifetime of being told she didn't belong. One flight attendant thought she was just another passenger to humiliate. One station manager believed old habits of prejudice would stay hidden in the shadows. But neither of them knew the truth that Maya was Horizon Air's new CEO and that night on the jet bridge would spark a revolution inside the airline industry. It's not just a story about a boarding pass. It's about dignity, resilience, and the fight to make the skies a place of respect for everyone. So, lean in. Ask yourself if dignity can be stripped so easily. What does it take to win it back? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the stories that challenge, inspire, and change the way we see the world. The sound was sharper than the steady hum of the engines outside the glass windows. A sound that cut deeper than the anxious chatter of boarding passengers. Paper tearing. A single, violent rip that seemed to slice through the noise of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 like a razor. For one senior flight attendant, that sound would be the prelude to her undoing. For Dr. Maya Ellington, it was the spark that would ignite a firestorm. It was late October, the kind of Chicago evening where the cold drizzle clung to coats and carried into the terminal on wet shoes and damp scarves. Gate C-27 of Horizon Air's flight to Paris was buzzing with tension. Boarding announcements blared, infants cried in strollers, the metallic beep of scanners chimed in steady rhythm, punctuated by the impatient sighs of travelers desperate to secure their overhead space. At the center of it all stood Claire Donovan. At 52, she was a veteran of the airline, 22 years in uniform. A career she wore like a badge of honor. Her blonde hair was coiled into a tight bun lacquered with hairspray, her posture as rigid as the pressed navy fabric on her shoulders. Claire believed in rules, not suggestions, not guidelines. Rules. In her mind, the manual was law, and she was its enforcer. Her gaze scanned the dwindling line like a commander inspecting troops, the harried businessman fumbling with his laptop, the college kid with headphones bigger than his backpack, the nervous couple clutching passports like sacred relics, and then the last passenger in the premium lane, Dr. Maya Ellington, to anyone who had spent the last 72 hours watching her work. Maya was more than a woman in gray slacks and a soft charcoal sweater. She was the storm that had walked into Horizon Air's boardroom and taken control of the airline itself. But at that gate, under Claire Donovan's withering gaze, Maya was just another tired traveler. Her hair, styled in locks that framed her face, betrayed the exhaustion of weeks spent shuttling between cities. Her eyes carried the weight of corporate battles fought in glass towers. She had just wrapped an exhausting stretch of transitional meetings in Dallas, barely surviving on vending machine coffee and restless hotel sleep. Tonight, all she wanted was the quiet sanctuary of seat 1A first class, Paris bound. 7 uninterrupted hours of rest before the next phase of her work began. "Good evening," Maya said softly, offering her phone with the digital boarding pass and her passport. Her voice carried the politeness of someone too drained to spar. Claire didn't return the smile. Her eyes flicked from Maya's face to the screen and back again. A frown tightened her features. priority boarding for premium and families with children has concluded," she announced, loud enough for passengers nearby to hear. "You'll need to join the general boarding line at the rear." Maya blinked, momentarily disoriented. "I think there's a mistake. My seat is 1A, first class." Claire leaned closer, her gaze deliberate, dragging across Maya's plain sweater and worn loafers. She had seen the name earlier, Dr. Maya Ellington. Important, powerful, it suggested, but this woman, in Claire's mind, didn't look the part. "The rules are for everyone," Claire repeated, her tone drenched in condescension. Maya's patience frayed. "I was already in line. I'm the last one. Surely, you can just scan me through." A younger gate agent, Daniel Brooks, shifted nervously beside Claire. His fingers twitched over the scanner. "She's right. Claire. She's the last for Zone 1. I'll handle this." "Daniel." Claire cut him off sharply without breaking eye contact with Maya. Her jaw tightened. "Let me see your physical boarding pass. These phone screenshots can be manipulated. It wasn't procedure. It was suspicion, wrapped in policy, a veiled insult," suppressing a sigh. Maya pulled a paper copy from her folio. She had printed it days ago, an old habit born of too many travel glitches. She handed it over. Claire's eyes scanned the print. "Seat 1A, Dr. Maya Ellington." The evidence was irrefutable, but prejudice had already written a different script in her mind. Claire pursed her lips. "This looks like an upgrade coupon. These are flagged for random verification. I'll need the credit card used to purchase." Maya felt her chest tighten. She steadied her tone. "It's a full fare ticket booked through a corporate agency. You can see the fare class marked right there, but Claire wasn't looking for facts. She was searching for affirmation of bias. If you cannot produce the documentation, I cannot allow you to board. Especially not in a premium cabin, Claire said, her words laced with implication. Whispers stirred from the general line. A few passengers leaned closer, curiosity sharpening their eyes. Maya felt heat rise in her chest, anger wrapped in humiliation. She had spent her life climbing walls built of these moments. Tonight, of all nights, she didn't need another one. "My identity is confirmed by my passport," Maya said, her voice firmer now. "The ticket is valid. Please scan me through." Claire's nostrils flared. She had built her career on projecting control, on never being challenged by someone she judged unworthy. And now, in front of witnesses, this woman was refusing to yield. So Claire acted. In one swift, startling motion, she gripped the boarding pass with both hands and tore it in half. The sound cracked through the terminal air. Rip. Then again. Rip. 4 jagged pieces fell like confetti onto the counter. "It appears your ticket is voided due to a verification issue," Claire declared coolly. "You'll need to visit the main service desk outside security. Step aside. You're holding up boarding." Gasps rose behind Maya. Daniel froze, horrified. Maya stared at the scraps of paper. For a heartbeat, exhaustion tempted her to explode, to unleash the authority she carried in silence. She could end Claire's career with a single phone call. One word, one command, but another instinct rose. Colder, sharper. This wasn't just a personal insult, it was data. Exhibit A of a sickness she had come to Horizon Air to cure. She slipped her phone from her bag, snapped a picture of the torn ticket and Claire's name tag, and tucked it away. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm enough to chill. "Don't worry, I'll sort it out." and she turned and walked away. Claire smirked, unaware that the woman she had just humiliated was not another passenger to be dismissed, but the very person who now controlled her entire future. And somewhere, above the thunder of rain against the terminal windows, the sound of paper tearing lingered like a warning. The walk away from gate C-27 was the longest walk Maya Ellington had taken in years. Her leather shoes tapped against the polished floor, the rhythm oddly hollow in the cavernous terminal. The rain outside pounded harder against the glass, streaking neon light into distorted shapes. Each step carried a quiet war inside her. Part of her wanted to stop, to turn back, to let her authority strike like lightning. Claire Donovan would be escorted out before the plane even left the ground, humiliated in front of her colleagues. Maya could have made a single call, whispered a name, and ended it instantly. But Maya hadn't spent her life rising through hostile boardrooms just to waste her power on quick revenge. No. What she had just witnessed wasn't just about Claire. It was about a system that had allowed someone like Claire to feel invincible enough to rip up a valid first-class boarding pass, a symptom of a disease that had spread through horizon air, unchecked for years. She found an empty row of chairs near a dimly lit corner of the terminal and lowered herself into one. For a moment, she pressed her palms into her eyes, forcing her breath into steadiness. Her body was weary, but her mind sharpened, as though the insult had injected a cold current of clarity. Maya pulled her laptop from her bag. The hum of travelers swirled around her, but she might as well have been alone. Fingers tapping, she booked herself on another flight, a competitor's Paris route leaving from Terminal 5 in 3 hours. Premium cabin. Expensive, yes. But tonight wasn't about saving money. It was about taking notes. Every detail from this experience, how one airline treated her versus how another did, would become data. Data she would use to build a case no board member could ignore. Next came the emails. The first was to Samuel Reed, her newly recruited Executive Vice President of Human Resources. Subject line, "Do not act yet." The message was clinical, stripped of emotion. She requested a complete file on Claire Donovan years of service, commendations, disciplinary reports, complaints. She wanted everything. And not just Claire. Every complaint filed against staff at O'Hare for the past 2 years. Patterns mattered more than anecdotes, and she knew there would be patterns. She flagged the request Level 1, eyes only, no leaks, no whispers. The second email went to Olivia Grant, her Chief Operating Officer, subject CCTV. Maya asked her to secure every camera angle from Gate C-27 between 5:45 and 7:15 p.m. She wanted video evidence of Claire's actions, Daniel Brooks' attempted intervention, and her own quiet withdrawal. She closed the laptop and exhaled. The anger in her chest had cooled into something sharper, determination. Claire had thought she was humiliating a powerless woman. In truth, she had just given Horizon Air's new CEO the perfect case study for systemic reform. But still, the personal sting lingered. Maya leaned back and let her eyes close. She thought of her mother, who decades earlier had worked as a housekeeper at a small regional airport. Her mother's stories had been filled with the quiet humiliations of low-wage service work, how certain passengers treated her like invisible furniture, how supervisors overlooked her, even when she worked double shifts. Maya had promised herself that if she ever held power, she would never allow those kinds of indignities to multiply unchecked. Now, here she was, in charge of an airline worth billions, and the culture at its core was just as rotten as her mother's stories from decades past. It wasn't just about a boarding pass. It was about dignity. By the time she rose from her chair, her course of action was locked. The ride on the interterminal train was strangely quiet. Travelers stared into phones. Children pressed their faces to the glass, watching airplanes taxi like silver beasts across the wet tarmac. Maya's reflection in the window looked different to her now, not just tired, but resolute. When she arrived at Terminal 5, the difference was immediate. Cleaner lines, softer lighting, a boarding gate staffed with agents who smiled without calculation. She approached, presented her new boarding pass, and heard what she had needed all along. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Ellington. We're honored to have you." It was simple, professional, respectful, and it hit her like a bomb. This was what Horizon Air had lost, not just passengers, but the art of dignity and service. The competitor's flight to Paris was smooth. The cabin crew spoke with genuine warmth. Her seat was comfortable, the champagne crisp. She allowed herself a brief moment of humanity watching city lights dissolve into darkness as the plane climbed, feeling the hum beneath her feet, the same hum she had loved since childhood. For those few hours, she rested, but her mind never stopped stitching plans. By the time the wheels touched French soil, Maya was ready. The morning drive through Paris to Horizon Air's European headquarters was cloaked in gray skies. Glass towers rose like cold sentinels over the city. In a corner office on the top floor, Maya stood before two of her closest allies. Samuel Reed and Olivia Grant sat across from her, faces tight with curiosity and dread as Maya recounted the events at Gate C-27. She told the story without raising her voice, without inserting emotion, just facts. Claire's dismissive tone, the baseless demand for a credit card, the tearing of the boarding pass, Daniel Brooks' attempt to intervene, her own decision to walk away. When she finished, silence hung heavy. Olivia spoke first. She had no idea who you were, none whatsoever. Maya replied. To her, I was just another black woman who didn't look like she belonged in first class. She acted on her prejudice. She believed she could get away with it, and my job now is to figure out why she believed that. Samuel slid a tablet across the table. We pulled the files. Claire Donovan has 22 years with the company. 17 complaints in the last 5 years. 11 involved discriminatory behavior, all marked unsubstantiated by her station manager, Robert Hensley. Maya's lips pressed into a line. 17, and every single resolution was the same. Samuel continued. Voucher issued, apology scripted, no discipline. Claire's record looked spotless on paper, because Hensley covered for her. Olivia opened her laptop and played CCTV footage. The silent video captured everything the calm way Maya approached. The defensive posture of Claire, Daniel's hesitation, the tearing of the ticket. In another angle, audio captured Claire's smug words to Daniel afterward. That's how you handle them. No exceptions. The word them hung in the air like a curse. Maya felt the anger rise again, this time braided with sadness. She thought of every passenger who had endured moments like that without the power she had. How many had been silenced? How many had walked away feeling less than human, with no way to fight back? "What's the play?" Samuel asked, his voice low. "We can terminate them both. Immediate dismissal. Gross misconduct. It's airtight." Maya shook her head. That would be too easy, too quiet. they'd vanish. People would shrug and say Claire finally went too far, but the culture that protected her would survive. I won't waste this moment. I need to make a statement. Olivia leaned forward. You want it public? Maya's eyes hardened. I want it transformative. Her plan began to take shape then. Not just to fire Claire and Hensley, but to dismantle the shield that had allowed them to thrive. To show every employee that dignity was not optional. To hold up a mirror so stark that no one could look away. She could feel the storm building, and this time, she wouldn't be walking away. The rain had eased by the time Maya Ellington returned to O'Hare 3 days later. But the clouds still hung low, heavy as if they knew a storm was about to break inside Horizon Air's walls. Her jet lag had barely lifted from the Paris trip, yet her mind buzzed with clarity. She had spent every hour reviewing files, scanning reports, and listening to recordings that revealed a pattern too rotten to ignore. Claire Donovan was not an isolated problem. She was a symptom of years of managerial decay. The real disease sat comfortably in the office of Robert Hensley, the station manager who had erased complaint after complaint. That morning, Maya dressed deliberately, not the gray sweater that Claire had mocked, but a deep navy blazer over a silk blouse. Professional, unmistakably authoritative, still understated, but no longer hiding. Her staff badge, CEO, Horizon Air, remained in her pocket. She wasn't ready to reveal it just yet, not until the stage was set. She boarded Flight 482 to New York to observe another crew incognito. For most passengers, it was an ordinary trip, but for Maya, it was a test. She settled into her seat in 2A, the same spot Claire had denied her, and watched closely. At first, the crew seemed professional enough, smiles practiced, greetings brisk but polite. Then came the microaggressions. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" the purser asked before glancing at her ticket. "Would you like me to explain how to adjust the seat controls?" another attendant offered, in the tone adults use with children. The remarks were small, almost invisible to anyone else, but Maya knew their weight. Each one carried the same implication: you don't belong here. She felt a familiar tightening in her chest, that push and pull between standing tall in the moment and letting the evidence accumulate. The CEO in her wanted to stand, announce who she was, and remind them that she didn't just belong, she owned the cabin. But the strategist in her whispered patience, collect the data, let their behavior tell its own story. Across the aisle, a young law student named Naomi Clark noticed. She had seen the raised eyebrows, the polite but sharp tone. Her phone, half hidden under a book, recorded short clips. She wasn't sure why. Something in her gut told her this passenger's experience mattered. Maya ordered water. It came without ice, warm and careless, while her neighbor in 2B received sparkling water poured carefully into a tall glass with a slice of lemon. The small differences piled up like pebbles in her shoe. Annoying, dismissible, but impossible to ignore once you felt them. She opened her notebook, a simple, leather-bound journal she carried everywhere, and began to write. Not numbers, not bullet points, reflections. They do not see me. They only see the seat number and judge if the face fits. Dignity should not be selective. Every omission, every clipped tone, is a wound disguised as service. Her pen slowed. She thought of Daniel Brooks, the junior gate agent from that night. How he had hesitated, caught between doing the right thing and obeying a superior. She wondered how many Daniels existed across Horizon Air, people who wanted to serve with fairness, but had learned to keep their heads down to survive. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their cruising altitude. Maya closed her eyes, letting the hum of the engines drown out her thoughts. She imagined herself, years earlier, a young consultant walking into her first airline boardroom, eager and naive. She had believed that data and performance charts could fix everything, that logic would dissolve bias, but logic alone had never dismantled arrogance. The plane touched down in New York just past noon. Maya disembarked quietly, blending with the crowd. She didn't need fanfare, she needed proof. And now she had more. Back at Horizon Air's headquarters, she convened a closed meeting with Samuel Reed and Olivia Grant. Their faces were grim. "We've pulled more than Claire Donovan's history," Samuel began. "Robert Hensley has suppressed or dismissed at least 37 passenger complaints in the last 2 years, many citing racial bias. He authorized compensation vouchers, but never documented discipline. In fact, Claire was nominated for a Service Excellence Award last spring." Maya's stomach twisted. "Service Excellence," she repeated softly, "for tearing down customers while pretending to build them up." Olivia pushed a folder across the table. "This is bigger than O'Hare. Other hubs show similar patterns, though less extreme. Managers protecting their veterans instead of their passengers." Maya opened the folder and scanned the pages. Names, dates, phrases like "denied boarding despite valid ticket," "treated rudely in first-class cabin," "told to sit in coach until verified." The language varied, but the theme was constant: discrimination masked as policy. For a long moment, she said nothing. She simply stared at the paper, her jaw tight, her heartbeat steady but heavy. Then she closed the folder with deliberate calm. "We're not going to bury this," she said. "We're going to confront it, publicly, loudly. And we're going to do it where it started at O'Hare. I want Claire and Hensley present. I want the crew witnesses, and I want it on record." Samuel hesitated. "That will be messy. There'll be backlash. Backlash is energy." Maya replied. "If we manage it, we turn it into momentum." Her tone carried no heat, no visible anger, just resolve. That evening, alone in her apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, Maya allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She curled into the couch, sipping tea, the city lights flickering against the glass. She thought of her late father, a man who had worked as a machinist at Midway Airport. He had taught her that every job, no matter how small, deserved respect. She could almost hear his voice. "Dignity is not negotiable." She whispered the words aloud, testing their weight in the quiet. Then she opened her laptop and drafted her next move an internal summons. A performance review scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m. in O'Hare's conference suite. Attendees Claire Donovan, Robert Hensley, select HR representatives, observer herself, role to be disclosed at meeting. The die was cast when the summons went out the next morning. Claire's jaw tightened as she read it. She believed it was just another audit, another box to tick. She had survived them before. She had Hensley on her side. Nothing would happen. But somewhere deep in her chest, a flicker of unease stirred. For Maya, the unease was gone, replaced by anticipation. The storm was gathering, and soon the walls of O'Hare would feel its full force. Friday morning at O'Hare began with the usual chaos. Lines snaked through security. Toddlers cried in strollers, and boarding announcements echoed against the steel and glass. But inside the administrative wing of Terminal 3, a different kind of tension hummed. Dr. Maya Ellington had arrived early, moving with calm purpose. She wasn't in disguise this time. No travel sweater, no low-key jeans. She wore a tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, and a pair of modest pearl earrings her mother had given her years ago. They weren't flashy, but they carried weight like a reminder of the generations whose dignity she carried into this fight. Samuel Reed and Olivia Grant were already waiting in the conference suite. The long oak table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and a projector hummed in readiness. A quiet hum of nerves filled the room. Samuel fiddled with his glasses. Olivia's fingers tapped a rhythmic beat on her notepad. Maya greeted them with a nod. "Are the files ready?" Olivia slid a laptop forward. All of it? Complaints, video evidence, personnel records, Hensley's doctored reports, Claire's entire complaint history. It's airtight. "Good," Maya said. Her voice was steady, almost serene, but beneath the calm, her thoughts churned. She knew this wasn't just about Claire Donovan or Robert Hensley. This was about sending a message to every single person wearing Horizon Air's uniform. A message that the old rules of silence and favoritism were over. She looked at the clock. 8:50 a.m. In less than 10 minutes, the first act of her performance would begin. "Remember," she told Samuel and Olivia, "I'm not the CEO in that room. Not yet. I'm Dr. Jordan from Corporate Oversight, brought in to review customer service incidents. Let them show us who they are when they think no one important is watching." Samuel gave a grim smile. "They'll hang themselves." "Exactly," Maya replied softly. The door opened. Claire Donovan stepped inside, heels clicking against the polished floor. She looked annoyed, not anxious. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, her uniform impeccable, her expression a mask of superiority. She nodded curtly at Olivia, ignored Samuel, and dropped into a chair opposite Maya. "Dr. Jordan," she said, her tone flat. "I was told this is about some customer complaint. I'd like to resolve it quickly. I have a San Francisco flight this afternoon." Maya simply folded her hands. "Of course. Why don't you start by walking us through your recollection of the incident on Flight 88 earlier this week?" Claire's eyes flickered. For a fraction of a second, her gaze sharpened on Maya's face the faintest trace of recognition. But she smoothed it over quickly, adopting the confident cadence she had perfected over the years. The passenger arrived late for priority boarding. She began. She seemed flustered, possibly trying to use a screenshot instead of a valid boarding pass. For security reasons, I asked for the original card used to book the ticket. She refused. She became non-compliant. I acted according to protocol and prevented her from boarding until the issue could be resolved. Her delivery was flawless, practiced. The words rolled out like she was reading from a script. Maya nodded slowly, and when the passenger presented a printed boarding pass, Claire hesitated only briefly. It appeared to be an upgrade coupon. Those require verification. When she refused to comply further, I voided the ticket. Maya let the silence stretch. She kept her face impassive, but her pulse ticked faster. She could see the arrogance in Claire's posture, the belief that the system would protect her again. At last, Maya turned to Olivia. "Please play the footage." The screen flickered to life. Grainy video filled the wall. Claire at the gate podium. The passenger Maya herself standing calmly. Claire's sharp gestures. Daniel Brooks trying to interject. And then The decisive moment, Claire snatching the paper boarding pass and ripping it clean in half. The sound, faint but clear, cut through the quiet room. On screen, pieces of paper fluttered to the counter. Claire's lips curled into a smug smile. Her words carried, muffled but audible. That's how you handle them. No exceptions. The video froze. Claire's face, proud and dismissive, hung suspended on the screen. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Maya leaned forward, her voice low but precise. "That is not protocol. Ms. Donovan, that is prejudice. Explain it." Claire's mask cracked. Her hands tightened in her lap. The footage doesn't tell the whole story. That passenger was difficult. You know how some people are. They think the rules don't apply to them. Maya's eyes narrowed. Some people, them. Interesting choice of words. The door swung open again. Robert Hensley, the station manager, strode in. He carried his usual confidence, chest out, a thumb drive clutched in his hand. "Sorry for the delay," he said breezily. "I've got a presentation for the executive review at 10, but I wanted to sit in. Claire is one of my best. If this is about a passenger complaint, I'm sure we can resolve it quickly." He stopped when he saw the paused video on the screen. His eyes flicked from Claire's frozen smirk to Maya's expressionless face. Something in his stride faltered, but he recovered fast. "This is taken out of context," he said. "Passengers exaggerate. My staff are dedicated professionals. Claire here is tough, but fair." "If you had the full data," Samuel interrupted, his tone sharp. "Full data. You mean the 37 complaints you buried, the vouchers you handed out instead of discipline, the falsified on-time reports. Is that the full data you mean, Mr. Hensley?" For the first time, Robert paled. Maya rose from her chair slowly. Deliberately, she let the silence thicken, let them both squirm under the weight of what was unsaid. Then she spoke. "For 72 hours, I've allowed you to believe this was just another review, that you could lie, minimize, and escape accountability the way you always have." Her voice was steady, but her words landed like hammer blows. "Let me be clear. My name is Dr. Maya Ellington, and as of Monday morning, I am the Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Air." The words detonated in the room. Claire's face drained of color. Robert's jaw dropped, then snapped shut again. His usual swagger evaporated, leaving only a slack mask of disbelief. Maya continued, her gaze locked on them. "You tore up my boarding pass, Ms. Donovan. You humiliated me in front of a crowd of passengers. You lied in this room minutes ago, and you, Mr. Hensley, protected her for years. You built a culture that rewarded prejudice and punished decency. That ends today." Robert sputtered. This is outrageous." "If I had known—" "Stop," Maya said sharply. Her tone wasn't loud, but it cut through him like glass. "The fact that you would have treated me differently if you had known who I was is the problem. Every passenger, every employee deserves respect. Seat 34E is just as valuable as Seat 2A. You both failed to understand that." Claire whispered hoarsely, "Please, my career, 20 years." Maya looked at her, the anger tempered by something deeper. "Weariness, disappointment. 20 years, and you learn nothing about dignity. 20 years, and you turn service into cruelty. It's over." Samuel slid 2 envelopes across the table. "Immediate termination," he said. "Credentials revoked. Security is waiting outside." Robert slumped back, eyes darting wildly as though searching for an escape route that no longer existed. Claire stared at the table, lips trembling, unable to speak. Maya stood tall, her presence filling the sterile room. You thought tearing up a piece of paper was the end of the story. But it was the beginning. You didn't just void a ticket. You tore open a window into this company's soul. And what I saw was rot. That rot ends today. She gestured toward the door. Security will escort you out. As the guards entered, Robert muttered under his breath, "You'll regret this. The union. The lawsuits." Olivia cut him off with icy precision. "We welcome it. Discovery will be public. Your history will speak for itself." Robert fell silent. The fight had drained from him. He and Claire rose stiffly, escorted out like prisoners. The door closed. The room exhaled. Maya turned to Samuel and Olivia. That was the first act. Now we moved to the main stage, because waiting in the next room, dozens of managers and supervisors from O'Hare were gathering for what they believed was a standard quarterly review. Instead, they were about to witness the dismantling of the old regime and the birth of something entirely new. Maya smoothed her blazer, inhaled deeply, and felt the steadiness return. The storm had broken, and now the real work would begin. The conference suite at O'Hare filled slowly, like a courtroom before trial. Department managers, senior supervisors, and a scattering of mid-level staff filed in with laptops and notepads, expecting the usual quarterly review. The atmosphere was casual at first side chatter about load factors, murmurs about delayed flights, complaints about union negotiations. But when they noticed the projector, already lit with a paused image of Claire Donovan at gate C-27, the room began to quiet. Something was different. Dr. Maya Ellington stood at the head of the table, hands folded lightly in front of her. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her presence commanded the space, and silence followed. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her tone was calm, but the weight behind it pulled every eye toward her. "What you are about to see is not a quarterly review. This is not business as usual. This is a crossroads moment for Horizon Air." A ripple of confusion passed through the room. Some managers shifted in their seats, glancing toward the door as if expecting Robert Hensley to arrive and set things right. He was not coming. Maya gestured toward the screen. Olivia pressed play. The footage rolled. Claire at the gate, ripping the boarding pass. Daniel Brooks trying to intervene. Maya herself, standing still, humiliated yet unbroken. The sound of paper tearing echoed through the speakers like a blade cutting through the room's pretense. Then came the damning words, "That's how you handle them." No exceptions. When the clip ended, silence hung like smoke. No one dared move. Maya let the stillness linger, her eyes sweeping the faces before her. Some looked down, guilty. Others looked stunned, caught between disbelief and recognition. A few crossed their arms, defensive, unwilling to accept what they'd just seen. Finally, she spoke. "You have just witnessed the behavior of one of your most senior flight attendants, a woman with 22 years of service, a woman many of you praised, protected, and promoted." Her voice remained level, but her words struck with surgical precision. She tore up the valid boarding pass of a paying passenger. She humiliated her publicly. She lied in an official review, and she did all of this because she believed the company would shield her, as it has many times before. A murmur spread across the room. Managers whispered to each other, some denying, others recalling incidents they'd quietly buried. Maya raised her hand, silencing them. Let me be clear. This is not about one flight attendant. This is about a system that rewards arrogance, punishes empathy, and tolerates prejudice as long as the paperwork looks clean. A system that tells passengers they are less than human if they do not fit someone's idea of who belongs in first class. Her gaze landed on one manager, who shifted uncomfortably. He had approved Claire's nomination for a service award. Maya let her eyes rest on him long enough for the truth to sting. "I know what you are thinking," she continued softly. "Some of you are telling yourselves that this was an isolated incident, that Claire went too far, but she was just one bad apple, that if we fire her and move on, the problem disappears." She stepped closer to the table, lowering her voice until the silence strained to catch it. "But you know better. You've seen it. You've let it pass. You've told yourselves it wasn't your problem, that it was easier to look away than to stand up." The words landed like blows, not shouted but sharpened by their very restraint. Maya turned toward Samuel. He handed her a folder. She opened it and began to read. Passenger complaint, June 4th. A black couple denied boarding despite valid first-class tickets. Offered coach seats instead. Vouchers issued. No discipline. She flipped a page. Complaint. September 19th. Latina business traveler told to wait until all other passengers boarded before verifying her upgrade. Humiliated in front of peers. Voucher issued. No discipline. Another page. Complaint. February 27th. Elderly man with an accent denied assistance when his seat assignment was challenged by another passenger. Staff dismissed the incident. Voucher issued. No discipline. She closed the folder slowly. The list goes on. 37 complaints in 2 years, all under Robert Hensley's watch, all erased from record, all smoothed over with vouchers, silence, and complicity. The room shifted. Some faces hardened, others softened. The air felt heavy, thick with recognition of guilt long ignored. Maya's eyes softened for the first time, though her voice held firm. "I want you to think about what that means. Every one of those complaints was a human being, a father, a daughter, a grandmother, someone who saved, planned, dreamed, and paid to travel with dignity. And every time, they were told, in effect, that their dignity did not matter, that the system would not protect them." She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "I did not become the CEO of Horizon Air to maintain that system. I became CEO to dismantle it and rebuild something better." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Some had suspected she was high-ranking. Few had guessed she was the top. Maya continued, steady as stone. "Claire Donovan has been terminated. Robert Hensley has been terminated. Their protection shield is gone, but their removal is not the solution. It is only the first step. What comes next is up to all of you." She gestured toward the screen again. The footage replayed silently. Claire ripping the ticket. The words, "That's how you handle them." Maya's voice dropped low, intimate, almost pleading. "Ask yourself, how many times have you handled them like that? How many times have you looked away when someone else did? How many Daniels are out there? Good employees silenced because they were too junior, too scared, too unsupported." At the mention of Daniel Brooks, a flicker of guilt passed across the faces of several supervisors. They knew his reputation conscientious, respectful, but often dismissed. This company will not survive on silence. Maya said, silence is complicity. From this moment forward, every single employee of Horizon Air is accountable for protecting passenger dignity. No exceptions. Not when it's easy, especially not when it's hard. The room was still, not because they agreed, not yet, but because they could feel the shift, a tide turning beneath their feet. Maya leaned forward, her hands braced on the table. You are at a crossroads. You can cling to the old ways, bury complaints, protect each other at the expense of passengers. If you do, you will not last here. Or you can choose a different path. A path where empathy is strength, where accountability is non-negotiable, and where dignity is the foundation of our service. Her eyes swept the room once more. Which path will you choose for a long moment? No one moved. Then Olivia spoke, her voice firm. Training begins next week. Mandatory. Bias awareness, conflict de-escalation, transparency protocols, a new hotline for complaints, anonymous reporting. Every case reviewed at the executive level, Samuel added. Performance bonuses will now be tied to complaint resolution metrics. Covering up incidents will end careers. Addressing them will build them. The room erupted in low murmurs again, but this time the energy was different. Not denial, not arrogance, uneasy acceptance, a recognition that the ground beneath them had shifted, and the only choice was to move with it or be buried by it. Maya stepped back, her voice quiet again. Remember this moment. Years from now, when people talk about Horizon Air, they will talk about how we chose dignity, or they will talk about how we failed. I will not allow failure. She straightened. Meeting adjourned. As chairs scraped and managers filed out, the atmosphere buzzed with uncertainty and fear, but also with something else, a flicker of possibility. Maya remained behind, watching the room empty. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a small, private exhale. The path was long, the resistance would be fierce, but the cornerstone had been laid, crossroads in the sky, and she had chosen her direction. The following week, the walls of Horizon Air's headquarters seemed to hum with nervous energy. Emails flew at all hours, meetings stretched long into the evening, and whispers carried through hallways like drafts of cold air. What had happened at O'Hare was no longer just a local scandal. It was a tremor shaking the entire company. Maya Ellington felt it everywhere she went, in the wary glances of executives who once held themselves untouchable, in the tight smiles of employees who weren't sure whether to trust her promises of change, and, most of all, in the ripple of fear spreading through the airline's middle management, the ones who had survived by burying complaints instead of confronting them. The reform had begun, but culture was a harder enemy than any single person. That Monday morning, Maya sat in her office overlooking the Chicago skyline. The rain had finally lifted, leaving Lake Michigan glinting in pale sunlight. She sipped her coffee slowly, reviewing the overnight reports. One headline caught her eye. Passengers live stream sparks questions about Horizon Air. She clicked. The article was from a student-run digital news site, but its reach had surprised even her. Naomi Clark's video, the footage she had discreetly recorded on her phone during that humiliating night at Gate C-27, had been uploaded 3 days ago. It had already gathered nearly 500,000 views. The video showed Claire Donovan tearing the boarding pass, her dismissive words, and Maya's calm but pained response. Though Naomi hadn't known who Maya really was, her caption spoke volumes. This is how black women are treated in first class. Maya leaned back, closing her eyes. The footage wasn't polished, but it was raw. Real, exactly the kind of evidence that resonated beyond corporate memos and boardroom debates. She felt both gratitude and a deep heaviness. Gratitude that someone had borne witness. Heaviness that it took viral outrage for people to believe what so many passengers had endured quietly. A knock pulled her from her thoughts. Samuel Reed stepped in, his tie slightly askew, his face lined with exhaustion. "We have a situation," he said, holding up a tablet. Maya motioned for him to sit. "Tell me, supervisors from Dallas, Miami, and Phoenix hubs are pushing back. They say mandatory bias training is insulting. Some are hinting at slowdowns if we enforce the new accountability protocols." Maya exhaled through her nose. The old guard digging in. Exactly. They're framing it as loyalty to their crews, but really it's self-preservation. They're afraid what we did to Hensley will happen to them. Maya tapped her fingers lightly on the desk. Inside. She felt the tug of weariness. It would have been so much easier to fire a few people, issue a polished statement, and let the storm pass. But easy fixes were how Horizon Air had ended up here in the first place. "We don't negotiate with shadows," she said quietly. "If culture is the problem, we shine a light. Call a joint managers summit. I'll address them directly." Samuel studied her. "You know, some of them will walk out." Maya met his gaze steadily. "Then let them walk. This is not a prison. No one is chained to this airline. But if they stay, they will serve with dignity. Or they will not serve at all." Her tone was even. But inside, she felt the ripple of conflict. Every decision she made tightened the line between progress and collapse. She thought of her father again, his calloused hands guiding hers across a blueprint when she was just a girl. "Measure twice, cut once," he used to say, but leadership wasn't wood or steel. It was people, fragile and unpredictable. How did you measure a soul? How did you rebuild trust without breaking it further? Later that afternoon, she visited the training facility near O'Hare where Daniel Brooks had been reassigned. He was running a small group session, helping new hires practice boarding protocols. His voice was calm but clear, his instructions precise. When he noticed Maya at the back of the room, his face flushed. The trainees glanced over curiously. "Keep going," Maya encouraged. Afterward, he approached her nervously. "I didn't expect. Thank you for coming." "You were the only one who tried to intervene that night," Maya said. "That matters." Daniel shook his head. "I should have done more." "You did what you could in the moment," Maya replied gently. "The system made you powerless. That's what we're changing." His eyes glistened, just slightly. "Most of us, we just want to do right by passengers. We just don't want to get crushed for it." Maya laid a hand on his shoulder. "You won't be crushed anymore. Not under my watch." For the first time that day, she felt a flicker of hope, but shadows do not recede quietly. 2 days later, Olivia Grant stormed into Maya's office, her usual composure cracked by urgency. "We've got a leak," she said, dropping a folder on the desk. Inside were screenshots from an anonymous forum where airline staff vented. Posts mocked the new Dignity Initiative, calling it political theater. Some called Maya the sweater CEO, ridiculing her appearance from Naomi's video. One post in particular chilled her. "She won't last. The old ways always win." Maya read the words slowly. Each one felt like a reminder of the resistance embedded deep into the airline's DNA. She looked up at Olivia. Good. Now we know who we're fighting. Olivia frowned. This could spiral. It already has, Maya said, but every shadow is proof of light. We're on the right path. They wouldn't resist this hard if we weren't. That night, as rain tapped gently against her apartment windows, Maya sat at her desk, alone with her thoughts. She turned Naomi's video on her phone, watching herself stand silently as Claire tore the boarding pass. She studied her own face, tired, composed, humiliated, but unbroken. She whispered to the reflection, as if speaking to her younger self, to her mother, to every passenger who had ever been told they didn't belong. We are not shadows. We are the sky itself. She knew the fight ahead would not be clean. Culture never surrendered without clawing back. But she was ready. The storm was no longer gathering. It was here, and she intended to fly straight through it. The week of the managers' summit arrived with a restless energy that coursed through Horizon Air like static before a storm. On paper, Maya Ellington was when training modules were designed, complaint hotlines were live, and employee handbooks were being rewritten to emphasize dignity and accountability. But culture was not paper. Culture lived in people, in habits, in quiet defiance that simmered beneath the surface. To prove it, resistance chose the one battlefield Maya knew best, the aircraft itself. She boarded Flight 612 from Chicago to Los Angeles as a quiet observer. She carried no entourage, no visible signs of authority, just her leather tote and her ever-present notebook. She wanted to see how crews behaved now that news of Claire Donovan's termination had spread like wildfire through staff lounges. The boarding process was smooth at first. A young couple with a baby was ushered kindly into their seats. An elderly woman was helped with her bag. For a fleeting moment, Maya felt the warmth of what Horizon Air could be, a place where the service lived up to its promise. Then came the slip, small at first, but sharp as glass under bare feet. A black passenger in business class, neatly dressed in a suit, asked for assistance stowing his carry-on. The senior flight attendant, a man with salt and pepper hair and the clipped tone of long habit, waved him off. "If it doesn't fit, you'll need to check it," he said curtly, before turning to assist a white passenger 2 rows back with exaggerated courtesy. Maya's stomach tightened. She watched as the man struggled alone, finally wedging his bag with visible effort. His face remained composed, but Maya recognized the familiar expression, the silent calculation of whether to protest and risk escalation, or to swallow the indignity and move on. She scribbled in her notebook. Bias persists even when unspoken. It lives in tone, in body language, in the uneven distribution of care. As the flight continued, the pattern repeated. Drink refills offered to some passengers, ignored for others. Polite banter for those who fit the image. Clipped instructions for those who didn't. At one point, the same senior attendant stopped by Maya's seat. He glanced at her ticket stub, then at her. "You're in the right cabin," he asked, voice neutral but loaded. "Yes," Maya said calmly, meeting his eyes. "I am." He nodded once, thin-lipped, and moved on. Her chest ached, not with anger, but with the weight of repetition. She had power. Yes, but what about every passenger who didn't? How many endured this drip of indignity until it hollowed their joy of travel across the aisle? A teenager recorded on her phone. Maya caught her eye, recognizing the spark of outrage. Another Naomi, perhaps, bearing silent witness. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, Maya disembarked without revealing her role. She needed evidence, not confrontation. But inside, her resolve crystallized further. The reforms were not reaching the cabin floor fast enough. At headquarters the next morning, she gathered Samuel Reed and Olivia Grant. The footage Naomi Clark had shared was still rippling online, now surpassing 2 million views. But Maya knew internal change mattered more than external applause. "I observed Flight 612 yesterday," she began. "The old culture is alive, not overt, not loud, but persistent." Samuel nodded grimly. "We've received similar reports. Some crews comply during audits but revert on regular flights. A quiet rebellion." Olivia tapped her pen against her notepad. "It's sabotage by subtlety. They know better than to rip tickets now, but microaggressions are harder to police." Maya leaned forward. "Then we don't police. We transform. Policing invites secrecy. Transformation invites ownership." She outlined her vision. A new program, Dignity, in flight to spotlight and reward crews who modeled empathy, fairness, and respect. Not punitive, but aspirational. Recognition, bonuses, career advancement. A system that made dignity profitable. Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Positive reinforcement instead of punishment." "Not instead," Maya corrected. "Alongside, the stick is termination, the carrot is pride. Both must exist." Olivia smiled faintly. "You're trying to rewrite instinct." "Yes," Maya said simply, "because instinct is where bias hides." Later that evening, in the quiet of her office, Maya replayed the moment on Flight 612 when the attendant had asked if she was in the right cabin. She had answered calmly, but inside she had wrestled with the urge to lash out, to expose him in front of everyone. She turned to her notebook, writing, "Restraint is not weakness. Restraint is strategy, but silence cannot last forever. At some point, the truth must be spoken aloud." Her phone buzzed, a message from Naomi Clark. "Dr. Ellington, I didn't know who you were that night, but I wanted you to see this. My video has gone viral. People are talking. They're asking if Horizon Air will change. Please tell me they will." Maya stared at the message, her throat tightening. She typed back carefully, "They will, because they must. Thank you for holding up the mirror." She set the phone down and looked out over the city. Lights flickered like constellations. For the first time in days, she let herself imagine the future, an airline where dignity was not the exception, but the rule. But she also knew shadows still lurked. The old guard would not surrender easily, and somewhere, someone was already plotting the next act of resistance. She whispered into the night, as if to steady herself against the storm still ahead. "Let them resist. The sky belongs to all of us, not to them." The summit in Los Angeles was meant to be a milestone for Horizon Air. Executives from around the globe gathered in a sleek downtown hotel, the air thick with polished speeches, polished suits, and polished smiles. Maya Ellington sat through presentations on fleet optimization, fuel hedging, and loyalty program redesigns. But beneath the charts and forecasts, she felt the simmering unease of a company still divided. Resistance had gone quiet. Too quiet. After Claire Donovan and Robert Hensley's public dismissal, many employees fell in line. But silence in an organization rarely meant compliance. It often meant plotting. Her instincts proved right when she boarded Horizon Air Flight 992 bound for Paris. It was a high-profile flight, packed with diplomats, executives, and journalists heading to a global business forum. If there was ever a stage for resistance to rear its head, this was it. Maya entered discreetly, traveling under her own name, but not announcing her role. She settled into Seat 2A, her notebook tucked in her bag, her body weary but alert. She had long ago learned that leadership required more than corner offices and prepared remarks. It required seeing, listening, and sometimes enduring firsthand what others endured. The crew that day was led by a purser named Martin Kessler. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the practiced confidence of someone who had spent years believing he controlled the cabin. His crew followed his lead with quiet obedience. Boarding began smoothly enough. Families with children were greeted warmly. Elderly passengers were offered assistance. But Maya noticed a shift when a group of African delegates boarded in tailored suits, speaking French among themselves. Martin's smile thinned. His tone grew clipped. "Stow your bags quickly. We're on a tight schedule." Minutes later, a young woman in economy asked for help with her overhead bin. Martin ignored her, but rushed to assist a businessman in first class, lifting his luggage with a flourish. It was subtle, but it was there, the hierarchy of worth, silently enforced. The cabin door closed, the engines roared to life, and the sabotage began. Service in the first class was deliberately sluggish. Meal orders were misplaced, drink requests forgotten. The Wi-Fi system, typically dependable, mysteriously malfunctioned. Maya watched as passengers grew restless, complaints rising like static in the pressurized air. She scribbled in her notebook, "Sabotage thrives on plausible deniability, incompetence as disguise for defiance." At dinner service, her test arrived. A flight attendant placed a tray in front of her. It was the wrong meal, an entree she hadn't ordered, paired with an unopened bottle of wine plunked down carelessly. No greeting, no eye contact. Maya looked up. The attendant avoided her gaze and walked away. Her chest tightened. She wasn't angry about the meal. She was angry about the message. The same quiet dismissal she had felt as a passenger months ago was happening again, even now, even to her. For a moment, she wrestled with herself. Should she reveal who she was? Should she summon authority, end the charade, and demand respect? Or should she stay silent, let the performance unfold, gather evidence of the resistance festering within her own airline? She chose silence. Across the aisle, a journalist shifted in his seat. His pen tapped his notebook. He had noticed the uneven service, too, and Maya realized this incident would not remain private. Halfway across the Atlantic, the situation escalated. A black woman in business class pressed her call button. She needed a blanket for her young son, who had fallen asleep shivering. The crew ignored her request twice. Maya's patience snapped. She unbuckled her seatbelt, rose, and crossed the aisle. "Excuse me," she said softly to the mother. "May I?" She walked to the galley, where Martin and two attendants stood, chatting quietly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flash her authority. She simply asked, "Could you please provide a blanket for seat 7D? The child is cold." Martin glanced at her, eyes narrowing. For a split second, Maya saw recognition. He knew who she was, and still, he hesitated. The silence stretched. Passengers nearby turned their heads, sensing the tension. Finally, one of the junior attendants grabbed a blanket and handed it over. Maya carried it back herself, draped it gently over the boy, and smiled at his mother. The gratitude in her eyes said more than words ever could. Maya returned to her seat, her pulse steady but her thoughts racing. The resistance was no longer abstract. It was embodied, deliberate, alive in the heart of the very company she had been hired to heal. As the plane crossed the Atlantic night, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Leadership is not tested in boardrooms. It is tested here, in the quiet cruelty of small acts, in the courage to intervene even when it feels inconvenient." When the plane landed in Paris, she disembarked without revealing her role. But she had already decided what came next. Back at headquarters, she convened Samuel Reed and Olivia Grant. "They are sabotaging us mid-air," she said flatly, not loudly, not openly, but enough to poison our brand, enough to humiliate our passengers. Samuel's jaw tightened. "We can fire Kessler immediately." Maya shook her head. "That's the easy path. We need to go deeper. This isn't one man. It's a network of quiet rebellion, and the only cure is sunlight." Olivia leaned forward. "You want to make it public?" "Yes," Maya said. "No more hidden firings, no more quiet settlements. The next act of resistance will be exposed in real time for every employee to see. We will make an example, not of one person, but of a culture. And we will replace it with something better." That night, alone in her apartment, Maya replayed the flight in her mind. The boy shivering under a too-thin shirt, the mother's quiet desperation, her own moment of hesitation before stepping in. She poured a glass of water and stood by the window, the Paris skyline glittering in the distance. She whispered to herself, not as a CEO, but as a woman who had endured too many small cruelties to count. They think silence protects them. But silence is over. The sky is not theirs to sabotage. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, calm, composed, but burning with resolve. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The following week arrived with the weight of inevitability. Dr. Maya Ellington knew the battle with Horizon Air's old guard could not be fought in shadows forever. Sabotage mid-air had crossed a line, and silence was no longer an option. If she allowed it to fester quietly, passengers would lose trust, employees would believe defiance was safe, and the Dignity Initiative would collapse before it took flight. So she crafted a plan. Not a memo, not a closed-door dismissal, but a public reckoning staged in the very theater where the resistance performed best the cabin of an aircraft. The opportunity came quickly. Flight 451 from Los Angeles to Chicago carried several reporters, a few politicians returning from a climate summit, and dozens of frequent flyers whose voices carried weight on social media. If sabotage occurred here, the world would see it, and if it didn't, Maya would shine a light anyway. She boarded without ceremony, slipping into seat 2A. The familiar leather against her back felt less like comfort and more like a test. Across the aisle, a journalist she recognized from Naomi Clark's retweets adjusted his camera bag. A senator scrolled through his tablet. Businessmen murmured about mergers. The stage was set. The crew moved briskly, led by Martin Kessler himself. His presence was no accident. Word of his behavior on the Paris flight had already reached Maya, and now he seemed determined to reassert control. His posture was stiff, his smile practiced but cold. As boarding concluded, Maya opened her notebook. The curtain rises, let them reveal themselves. The first act came swiftly. A Latina passenger in first class asked for help adjusting her seat. Martin leaned over, his tone dripping with condescension. "It's very simple. Just press the button, Anyone can figure it out." He didn't stay to help. Several passengers glanced at each other, uncomfortable. The woman flushed, but said nothing. Maya's pen scratched across the page, humiliation disguised as instruction. Next, a black couple in business class requested sparkling water. The junior attendant glanced toward Martin, who shook his head subtly before telling them the sparkling water wasn't stocked on this flight. 2 rows later, the same junior attendant delivered sparkling water to a white businessman without hesitation. This time, murmurs spread audibly. The journalist across the aisle adjusted his phone discreetly. Recording. Maya felt the familiar ache in her chest. She had endured this drip of indignity for years, but tonight it wasn't just about her. It was about exposing what passengers lived through daily. She waited. The breaking point came when a teenager in economy, a black boy traveling alone, rang his call button. He asked politely for headphones, explaining his had broken. Martin approached, towering over him. "You'll have to wait until we finish service," he said sharply. "Next time, bring your own. We're not a convenience store." The boy's shoulders hunched, his face fallen. A woman nearby muttered, "That's not right." Maya unbuckled her seatbelt. She rose slowly, deliberately, letting the moment stretch. Every eye in first class turned toward her as she stepped into the aisle. "Mr. Kessler," she said calmly, her voice carrying with quiet authority. "Bring the boy his headphones, now." Martin blinked. For a second, he looked as though he might refuse, but something in her tone froze him. He stalked to the galley, snatched a set of headphones, and dropped them onto the boy's tray table without a word. The boy whispered, "Thank you." His eyes, wide with a mix of fear and relief, locked onto Maya. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You deserve kindness," she said softly. Then she turned back toward first class. Her gaze swept the cabin. Dozens of passengers stared, some with shock, others with anticipation. The journalist's phone was aimed directly at her. It was time. She stepped into the aisle, her posture tall, her voice even but firm. "My name is Dr. Maya Ellington. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Air." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The senator lowered his tablet. The journalist leaned forward, eyes alight. Phones came up, recording. Maya continued, her tone unwavering. "What you have witnessed tonight is not service. It is sabotage. It is prejudice disguised as professionalism. It is exactly the culture that has poisoned this airline for years, and it ends now." Martin's face flushed crimson. "You can't address me like that in front of passengers," he hissed. "Yes, I can," Maya said evenly, "because these passengers deserve truth more than you deserve comfort." She gestured toward the couple denied sparkling water. The woman mocked for her seat. The boy humiliated for asking a simple request. This is not about inconvenience. It is about dignity. Every single passenger, no matter where they sit, deserves respect. That is the standard of Horizon Air, and anyone who cannot live by it will not serve here. The cabin was silent except for the hum of engines. Dozens of phones recorded. The weight of the moment pressed on every heart. Maya faced Martin directly. "You have chosen defiance over service. You have humiliated those you swore to assist. Effective immediately. You are relieved of duty." He sputtered, eyes darting to his crew for support. None came. The junior attendants avoided his gaze, frozen by the authority unfolding before them. Maya turned to the nearest attendant. "Please inform the captain. Upon landing in Chicago, Mr. Kessler will be escorted off this aircraft. Security will meet us at the gate." The attendant nodded quickly, voice trembling. "Yes, ma'am." Martin sank into his jump seat, his power evaporating. Maya turned back to the cabin. Her voice softened, though it carried the same steady weight. "I apologize to each of you. What you have endured tonight is unacceptable. Horizon Air belongs to every passenger who boards our planes, not to a culture of arrogance. This moment will not be hidden. It will be remembered as the night we chose dignity over silence." The senator began to clap. Then the woman in 2B joined. Soon the sound filled the cabin, applause swelling like a tide. Some passengers recorded. Others simply watched with tears in their eyes. Maya sat back in her seat, heart pounding but face calm. She had not planned the applause. She had not sought it. But she knew the video would travel farther than any press release ever could. As the aircraft descended into Chicago, she wrote one final line in her notebook: "Reform is not policy. Reform is lived, witnessed, undeniable." Tonight, we took flight. When the wheels touched the runway, passengers cheered again, and somewhere in the shadows of Horizon Air, the old guard knew their time was ending. By the time Horizon Air Flight 451 rolled to a stop at Chicago O'Hare, the story had already left the cabin and entered the bloodstream of the internet. Passengers uploaded clips the moment wheels touched down. The applause, the confrontation, Martin Kessler's stunned face, and Maya's calm declaration of her role had all spread at lightning speed. In the terminal, clusters of travelers huddled around glowing phone screens, murmuring. That's the CEO. She was on the flight. Reporters scrambled to verify, their inboxes filling with shaky videos and urgent tips. The phrase, "Horizon Air CEO confronts flight attendant," began trending before Maya had even stepped off the aircraft. Security officers met the plane at the gate, escorting Martin away as passengers looked on. Some applauded again. Others simply shook their heads, astonished that arrogance could collapse so swiftly. Maya kept her composure, thanking passengers as she disembarked, her mind already racing toward the storm ahead. In the car to headquarters, Samuel Reed's voice crackled through the phone. "The videos are viral. Millions of views in under an hour. Major outlets are calling. CNBC wants you live tomorrow. CNN too." Maya closed her eyes briefly. "We can't spin this. We won't. The footage speaks for itself." Olivia Grant joined the call. The union's already reacting. They're furious. They say you humiliated a crew member publicly. "I didn't humiliate him," Maya said softly but firmly. "He humiliated himself. All I did was refuse to look away." She felt the weight of those words settle in her own chest. Refusal had consequences, and she would bear them. At headquarters that evening, the executive team gathered in the glass-walled boardroom. Screens displayed headlines scrolling across news sites. CEO exposes airline's hidden culture. Passenger dignity takes center stage. Crisis or turning point. The tension was thick, but Maya entered with quiet authority. She placed her notebook on the table, opened it, and began without preamble. What happened on Flight 451 was not a mistake. She said it was a mirror. And now the world has seen what too many passengers already knew. Some executives shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. We could frame this as a training lapse. "No," Maya interrupted gently but firmly. "This isn't a lapse. It's a legacy. And we can't reform a legacy by pretending it's an accident. She turned to Samuel. What are employees saying? He pulled up a live feed of internal chat rooms. Messages flew by in real time. Some praised Maya's courage. Others fumed about betrayal, about feeling exposed. A few threatened walkouts. This is the line in the sand, Samuel said. Maya nodded slowly. Then let's draw it clearly. She rose, pacing the room with measured steps. Tomorrow, I will hold a press conference. We will not dodge. We will not issue vague apologies. We will declare, openly, that Horizon Air is confronting systemic prejudice in its ranks. We will announce firings. Yes, but more importantly, we will announce reforms, real reforms, visible, measurable, irreversible. Olivia raised an eyebrow. You know, shareholders will panic. Stocks could plunge. Maya stopped, looking out at the city lights beyond the glass. Let them. Trust is more valuable than stock price. Rebuild trust, and the stock will follow. She turned back, her gaze sharp. Dignity is not a liability. It is our only future. Silence fell, heavy but alive with something new possibility. The next morning, cameras crowded into Horizon Air's headquarters atrium. Employees lined the balconies above, curious and wary. Maya stepped to the podium, her black suit crisp, her pearl earrings gleaming softly. She began not with statistics, not with corporate jargon, but with story. Last night, on Flight 451, I witnessed passengers denied basic respect, a mother dismissed, a couple lied to, a child humiliated. I intervened not as CEO, but as a fellow traveler. What happened in that cabin was unacceptable, and it was not unique. It was the symptom of a culture that tolerated arrogance and prejudice for too long. The room was silent, but for the clicking of cameras. Maya's voice deepened with conviction. That culture ends today. Horizon Air is launching the Dignity Initiative mandatory training for all staff, transparent complaint reporting, independent oversight, and performance tied directly to respect. Those who sabotage will be removed. Those who serve with empathy will rise. She paused, letting the words settle. We don't sell seats. We sell trust, and trust cannot exist without dignity. Applause broke out from some employees in the balconies. Reporters shouted questions. Maya answered calmly, refusing to hide. Yes, Martin Kessler was terminated. Yes, others would follow if they resisted. No, she would not apologize for holding leaders accountable in public. The press conference lasted less than 30 minutes, but by its end, headlines were already shifting. CEO declares Dignity Initiative. Airline promises structural change. Investors grumbled, but ordinary passengers flooded social media with support. Later that night, alone in her office, Maya reviewed emails pouring in from around the world. Some were angry. Many were grateful. One caught her eye, a message from the mother of the boy on Flight 451. Thank you for seeing him. Thank you for telling him he deserved kindness. He will never forget it. Neither will I. Maya closed her eyes, the ache in her chest easing just slightly. She whispered to herself, That's why. That's the reason. But even as gratitude filled her, she knew the backlash was only beginning. Unions would push harder. Old guard managers would dig deeper. Shareholders would demand reassurance. The storm had only grown stronger, and yet, for the first time, the sky ahead felt a little clearer. She picked up her pen, wrote in her notebook, Public Reckoning Complete. The work truly begins now. The applause of the press conference had barely faded when the backlash roared to life. Within hours, the union representing Horizon Air's flight attendants issued a blistering statement. They accused Dr. Maya Ellington of public shaming, of humiliating a veteran crew member without due process. They framed Martin Kessler not as a saboteur but as a scapegoat, a man sacrificed to corporate image. The next morning, picket lines appeared outside O'Hare. Placards read, "Respect workers too," and "Fair process, not fear." The chants carried through the terminal, rattling passengers and unnerving staff. Maya watched the footage in her office, her jaw tight but her face calm. Samuel Reed strode in, dropping a folder onto her desk. "They're threatening a strike." Olivia Grant followed, her phone buzzing with notifications. "Shareholders are furious. Stock dropped 7% overnight. Calls are coming from every direction: investors, board members, politicians." Maya closed the folder without reading it. Of course they're furious. Change is uncomfortable. Samuel pinched the bridge of his nose. But if the union strikes, flights will be grounded. That's not just uncomfortable, that's chaos. Maya rose, walking slowly to the window. The Chicago skyline stretched before her, steel and glass gleaming against the morning light. She felt the pull of doubt in her chest, heavy and persistent. Was she pushing too fast? Too hard? Could an airline survive turbulence this severe? Her father's voice echoed faintly in memory. If you compromise your dignity to keep the peace, you lose both. She turned back. We will not retreat. We will not soften, but we will engage. Call a meeting with the union leaders. Today, that afternoon, in a hotel conference room near O'Hare. The showdown began. Union leaders filled one side of the table, arms crossed, faces stern. Cameras were barred, but tension crackled like static. Maya entered with Samuel and Olivia at her side. She didn't sit immediately. She let the silence breathe, let the weight of her presence settle. Then she spoke. "I know why you're angry," she said calmly. "I know you feel threatened. But let's be clear. This is not about humiliating workers. This is about protecting passengers. When a child is humiliated, when families are lied to, when dignity is denied, that is not service. That is sabotage." A union leader, a stout man with a gravelly voice, leaned forward. "Martin Kessler served this airline for 26 years. He made mistakes, sure, but you destroyed him in front of passengers. That's not leadership. That's theater." Maya met his eyes without flinching. No, the theater was his. The stage was his arrogance. I simply refused to let the curtain hide it. Murmurs rose from the union side. Some nodded reluctantly. Others scowled deeper. Another leader, a woman with sharp eyes, spoke next. "Our people are scared. They think every misstep will cost them their careers. They think you'll turn every flight into a spectacle." Maya's voice softened. "Then hear me clearly. This is not about punishment for mistakes. This is about accountability for prejudice. There is a difference. If someone forgets a drink order, they will not lose their job. But if someone humiliates a child for asking, or lies to passengers because of who they are, that will end their career. Do you understand the distinction?" Silence. The woman's gaze faltered just slightly. Maya leaned forward, her tone firm but steady. "Your members deserve protection. Yes, but passengers deserve dignity. One cannot come at the expense of the other. We will protect both, or we will protect neither." For hours, they debated. Voices rose, tempers flared, but by the end, a fragile understanding formed. The union agreed to suspend strike threats in exchange for joint training development and a clear review process for alleged misconduct. Maya conceded process, but not principle. That night, exhausted, she sat alone in her apartment. The city hummed outside her window, but her thoughts were louder. She replayed the meeting, the anger in their eyes, the fragility of the truce. She opened her notebook. Backlash is proof of impact. If no one resists, nothing is changing. Her phone buzzed. A message from Naomi Clark. Saw the press conference. People in my class are debating it. Some say you were too harsh. Most say it was the most honest thing they've ever seen from an airline. Don't stop. Maya smiled faintly. A college student, with no stake in shareholder returns, understood more than most executives. The next morning, she faced the board. The directors were restless, some sympathetic, others openly hostile. One gray-haired investor slammed his hand on the table. You are tanking this company's value 7% in one night. If you keep this up, we'll lose billions. Maya sat tall, her voice quiet but cutting through the noise. Value is not just stock price, value is trust. Lose that, and billions won't matter. The boardroom stilled. She continued, if you want a CEO who hides problems, who pays off complaints with vouchers, who buries dignity for the sake of comfort, then you chose the wrong woman. But if you want a CEO who will make Horizon Air the airline passengers trust most, no matter the turbulence, then stay the course with me. No one spoke. The choice hung in the air like unbroken cloud. That evening, Maya stood at O'Hare's Terminal C, watching flights depart. Passengers streamed through security, boarding passes in hand. Some recognized her and whispered. Others walked past unaware. She felt the storm still raging union anger, shareholder panic, employee fear, but beneath it, she sensed something else, a current shifting, a whisper of belief. She whispered to herself, this is not the end, this is the climb, and for the first time, she truly believed the sky could be cleared. The weeks that followed felt like a trial by fire. Headlines shifted daily, some praising Dr. Maya Ellington as a revolutionary leader, others condemning her as reckless, a CEO too willing to risk stability for principle. Shareholders fretted, unions muttered, and passengers watched closely, weighing whether Horizon Air was truly becoming the airline of dignity she had promised. Maya carried the weight of it all quietly, moving through each day with a steady calm that belied the storms around her. Inside, she wrestled with doubt. Some nights she stared at the ceiling until dawn, asking herself if she was tearing apart more than she was building. Other nights she found strength in the messages of passengers, mothers, students, grandparents thanking her for speaking aloud what they had endured in silence. She realized that leadership was not about certainty. It was about choosing conviction even when doubt roared loudest. The turning point came one Friday morning in the vast hangar where Horizon Air held its annual staff assembly. Thousands of employees filled the space, from flight attendants and pilots to mechanics and gate agents. The air buzzed with nervous expectation. For the first time since the reforms began, the entire company would hear directly from Maya. She walked onto the stage without notes, only her leather-bound notebook in hand. The applause was hesitant at first, scattered. She stood in silence until the room settled, then spoke in a voice clear and steady. I know many of you are angry. she began. "I know many of you are afraid. Some of you believe I humiliated a colleague. Some of you believe I endangered our stock. And some of you believe I will never understand what it feels like to serve in a cabin, facing passengers every day." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maya let them rise, then fall. "You are right about one thing. I have not walked your path, but I have walked as a passenger. I have walked as a black woman told she did not belong in first class. I have walked as a daughter watching her mother denied respect. I have walked as a human being who has seen dignity stripped away for no reason other than prejudice. And I refuse to let that walk continue unchallenged." The hangar grew still. Maya opened her notebook and read aloud. "Here is what passengers have written to me since this began. Thank you for telling my son he deserves kindness. Thank you for showing my grandmother that her accent is not a flaw. Thank you for making me believe air travel can be safe not just for my body, but for my dignity." Her voice caught slightly on the last line, but she pressed forward. "This is why we are here. Not for stock tickers, not for corporate comfort. For them, for every human being who boards our planes hoping to be treated with respect." She looked across the sea of faces, some defiant, some softened, many uncertain. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be human, to choose kindness even when it is hard, to offer dignity even when you're tired, and to hold each other accountable, because silence is complicity." She paused, then added, her tone almost a whisper, "I cannot do this alone. Horizon Air cannot do this alone. But together, we can be the airline where dignity takes flight." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, applause began scattered at first, then building, echoing through the cavernous hangar until it became a roar. Some stood, clapping with tears in their eyes. Others clapped stiffly, still resisting but unable to ignore the tide. Samuel Reed, watching from the side of the stage, exhaled deeply. Olivia Grant allowed herself the faintest smile. For the first time, the reform felt less like an edict and more like a movement. In the weeks that followed, the Dignity Initiative rolled out in full, training sessions filled with real conversations rather than hollow lectures. Passengers were invited to share their stories directly with crews. An anonymous reporting system captured both failures and triumphs, shining light on behavior once hidden. The results surprised even Maya. Complaints dropped sharply. Positive passenger feedback surged, and slowly, skeptics within the ranks began to shift. Some of the loudest critics found themselves moved by the gratitude of passengers they once dismissed. The financial tide turned too. What shareholders feared would sink, the company began to lift it. Passenger loyalty grew, market share climbed. Within a year, Horizon Air's stock rebounded, stronger than before. But for Maya, the greatest measure was not financial. It was a letter she received 6 months later, written in careful handwriting by a young boy. "Dear Dr. Ellington, I was the one on the plane who asked for headphones. You told me I deserved kindness. Now I want to be a pilot. Thank you for seeing me." She held the letter to her chest, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. For all the backlash, the fury, the sleepless nights, it was this a child's belief in his own worth that told her the sky had truly been reclaimed. On a crisp autumn morning, she boarded a routine Horizon Air flight, unannounced. She sat quietly in 2A, her notebook in her lap. This time, the service was warm, consistent, genuine. Passengers smiled, attendants moved with care, and no one was asked if they belonged. As the plane lifted into the blue, Maya closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. The work was not finished. Culture never was. But dignity had found its wings, and it would not be grounded again. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the hum of the engines, "The sky belongs to all of us." And for the first time since stepping into this storm, she felt at peace. As the final chapter of Dr. Maya Ellington's journey closes, one truth remains impossible to ignore: dignity is not a luxury. It is a birthright. What began as a single act of disrespect, the ripping of a boarding pass, unfolded into a battle that shook an airline to its core. We witnessed arrogance unmasked, resistance crumble, and the quiet power of one woman transform an entire culture. But this story is bigger than Horizon Air. It's about every passenger who has ever been told they don't belong, every voice silenced by arrogance, every child, every parent, every traveler who deserves kindness but met cruelty instead. Maya's stand reminds us all that silence feeds injustice, but courage breaks it. As we step away from this story, may we carry with us both love and outrage. Love for the resilience of those who rise above humiliation, and outrage at the prejudice that dares to shrink them. Because true change begins when we feel both. If this story moved you, share it. If you believe dignity belongs in every seat, speak it. And if you want to hear more stories that stir the heart and demand justice, like this video, share it widely, and subscribe to our channel.